What you'll want to avoid is being too relationship focused. We want to avoid being too focused on others and not enough on ourselves. Because after all, Venus retrograde means let's slow down and take a look at our relationship. What's going on, world? It's your boy Gemini Brown here, back with another episode of Nalo Kicking Knowledge. Today, we'll be talking about what to avoid while Venus is retrograde in Aries this year. So, let's get into it. All right, party people. Mars is now direct. We are here in Pisces season, which means Aries is up next. Spring is on the horizon, so it's warming up everywhere. What I want to talk about today is some things you should avoid during this Venus retrograde in the sign of Aries. So the first thing I want to point out to you is that this is coinciding after Mars has been retrograde for some time and retrograde in the sign of Cancer. So with Mars now direct, gonna eventually head into Leo, we are all regaining our poise, rebuilding our confidence. And remember, we don't want to lose sight of what we learned while Mars was retrograde. What did we reprogram? What are now our emotional reactions to things? Are we conserving our energy or making better use of it? So with Venus retrograding in a Mars ruled sign, both of their movements will be influencing one another. What you'll want to avoid is being too relationship focused. With Venus being in Aries, the sign of self and self-motivation, and then Mars eventually going to be within Leo, another fire sign. This is giving us the insight to continue to focus upon self. And if we're building off of what we learned during Mars retrograde, it's really about taking that motivation, or rather acknowledging what was keeping you emotionally off-centered or taken away from your motivation, and doubling down on the practices that accentuate that. Okay, so we want to avoid being too focused on others and not enough on ourselves. Because after all, Venus retrograde means let's slow down and take a look at our relationship. Now, this brings me to my next point. Many of you are probably wondering, well, what does this retrograde mean for me if I'm already in a relationship? Well, I believe that people in partnerships can benefit from this retrograde depending on where you are in your partnership. So for one example, let's say you're 3 years in, things are familiar, and maybe they're coming to a point where you need a new direction. This retrograde in the sign of Aries is great for redefining the foundation in which your relationship is built on, reigniting certain motivations, or rediscovering the things that you like about each other or that actually brought you together. But remember, Aries is about like new beginnings. So it's not about you having to start over with someone else. It's about with your partner figuring out, okay, how can we begin a new chapter in our relationship? A more practical translation would be, if you and your partner don't work out with one another, that's an amazing chapter to start within your relationship. But a little bit more how I feel like others can benefit from relationships during this retrograde period is rather simple. Are these relationships supportive and motivating, particularly of your own individuality? This is a time in which you're going to have to be forced to really fully acknowledge what you need from others as well as yourself. So this is, like I said, how we can take what we learned during the Mars retrograde and use it to thrive or benefit during this Venus retrograde. Next thing you're going to want to avoid, and this is major, and I feel like you're only going to hear this perspective from me because I really listen to people and understand things. You don't want to play with people's feelings, particularly in an emotional or impulsive way. The retrograde is going to be the retrograde, which is going to add an element or a desire for excitement, right? But the key is like, how do we excite ourselves? There's a reality here that in this world, we can use so many other things to distract or entertain us. And this can also come in the form of like other people. So cutting right to the chase, I think this is like a real spiritual lesson everyone has to go through and learn. And ultimately, it only strengthens your ability to attract. I think everyone is going to come into a situation where there may be someone out there that likes you, and maybe you give them a chance and you just don't like them back as much as they like you. But the important thing is that you just simply don't lead them on. With Venus traveling from Aries back into Pisces, as well as with all the other transits going on, I do think there is a potential for people to feel used, particularly like I just mentioned. Let's say we have someone who's unconsciously devoting a lot of attention to others during this time. And maybe you, someone with the knowledge of astrology, is the beneficiary of this person's efforts. And you realize, I'm not into them like that. The best thing you can do spiritually is put an end to that. Word to Saturn and Pisces. It's just one of those things you got to learn. And as I said before, it'll strengthen your ability to attract future things. So that's some food for thought. We don't want to lead anyone on or play with their feelings. Another thing you're going to want to avoid during this Venus retrograde is avoiding, I'm going to say, hard things. Doing things that are difficult or challenging. Aries represents this energy of like trying. And like when you try, you can prove many things to yourself, right? And ultimately, this is a period in which we have the chance to harmonize how we use our will. But to get to that point, we are going to need to challenge ourselves. So this is the time in the journey. And this also even relates towards like what this new moon in Pisces is going to kick off. Like, we got to be willing to dig ourselves out of a hole or swim out of deep waters into better waters. We got to like be willing to accept some form of challenge. I feel like part of that challenge here is just within doing things that can be difficult, which at its baseline, if you're beginning something or starting from zero, that's hard. You know, on the confidence level, you have to go through the process of realizing like, damn, I'm not good at this. Or like, damn, this is not how I want it. But just like anything in life, you stick with it, it improves. Okay? This is going to be really important because then during this Venus retrograde, Mercury is going to go retrograde. And I'm telling you, it's going to add to that. So mentally, you could think like, yeah, I'll just keep avoiding certain shit. But really, it's not helping you build, the necessary muscle. So it's a little bit of advice, y'all, for this Venus retrograde. Talk to me. Let me know what's on your mind. What are you going to focus on? If you need a reading, check out my website. I got sales going on. I'm here. Until next time.